A millionaire tricked his virgin assistant into a fake party, but that night changed everything. New York never slept. The lights of towering skyscrapers reflected against the crisp autumn air, a city that thrived on ambition and power. Caldwell Enterprises stood tall in the heart of the financial district, where only the ruthless survived and the ambitious conquered. On the 50th floor, Natalie Carter stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of the CEO's office, watching as the city awakened. For 3 years, she had been the executive assistant to Ethan Caldwell, the youngest CEO in the company's history, a man of precision, control, and an impenetrable coldness. But Natalie understood him. She was the only one who knew exactly how he took his coffee, the slight crease of his brow when he disapproved of a contract, or the heavy silence that meant he was making a critical decision. And maybe she had spent too much time caring about those details. The clock struck 6:45 a.m. As always, she was alone in the office until the unmistakable ding of the private elevator shattered the quiet. She didn't need to turn around to know who had arrived. Ethan Caldwell. His footsteps echoed against the marble floor as he entered. Each step measured, calculated. His dark tailored suit was as flawless as the image he projected. Powerful, untouchable. Yet for just a second, his gaze lingered on Natalie a moment too long. The finance department's quarterly report? His voice was deep, sharp, yet there was a softness there, subtle but present when he spoke to her. "Already on your desk," she replied smoothly, her tone as professional as ever. The exchange lasted only seconds, but the tension between them had always been more than just business formality. There was something unnamed, something unspoken, an invisible thread pulling them closer while keeping them apart. She adjusted her blouse, turning away before her heart could betray her. And Ethan? He clenched his hands behind his back, his gaze catching her reflection in the glass. The only woman who had ever made the walls around him feel unsteady. Everything remained the same, but for how much longer? For 3 years, every morning played out the same way. Ethan Caldwell walked into his office, composed and unreadable, while Natalie Carter had already prepared his meticulously planned schedule for the day. To outsiders, their relationship was the epitome of professionalism, a dedicated executive assistant and a sharp, calculating CEO. But only they knew the truth. This was a carefully choreographed performance, a delicate game they had played for 3 years. Ethan trusted no one but Natalie. No other employee could anticipate his needs like she did. She knew when he needed silence, when to switch his usual Americano for a double espresso, and when to reschedule high-stakes meetings because he wasn't in the right frame of mind. But knowing him didn't mean she was allowed to touch him. Every time Natalie entered a boardroom in that deep blue dress, Ethan had to clench his fists under the table to keep himself from reaching for her. Every late-night strategy session, when the only thing separating them was a desk, the air between them felt thick with something unsaid. There were small moments that felt dangerously significant. When their fingers brushed as she handed him a document, and his breath caught for just a second. When their eyes met for too long, and she quickly looked away, pretending it never happened. When a senior executive made an offhanded remark about women in the boardroom, and Natalie's expression hardened. Ethan had to grip his pen tighter to stop himself from speaking up. He wanted to close the distance. But what would happen if he did? Natalie wasn't the kind of woman who got swept up in an office romance. She had worked too hard to prove her worth. She refused to be the subject of rumors that she was favored by the CEO. She had earned her position on her own, and she wasn't about to let emotions ruin everything. But despite all the reasons she reminded herself of, her heart still faltered every time Ethan stood too close. For 3 years, they had maintained the illusion of perfect professionalism. But how much longer could they keep pretending? Ethan Caldwell had never been a man afraid of risk. He had built an empire from nothing, outmaneuvering some of the toughest competitors in the industry. But no business deal had ever made him this anxious. How could he get a moment alone with Natalie, outside the rigid boundaries they had drawn? The solution? A perfect lie. It was a busy Monday morning when Ethan walked into the office and saw Natalie reviewing his schedule on her dual monitors. He stopped at her desk, his voice calm but carrying an unusual hesitation, a rarity for him. Natalie, I need your help with something. She looked up, sharp and attentive as always. Of course, Mr. Caldwell. He pressed his lips together before speaking. I'm hosting a birthday party for my niece, Emily, this Saturday. She's turning 16. I want it to be perfect. Natalie blinked, momentarily surprised. In 3 years of working together, he had never mentioned family. A small part of her warmed at the thought of this powerful, composed man caring so deeply about someone. You'd like me to help organize it? She asked, a soft smile forming. He nodded. You have a better eye for this than I do. I trust you to make it special. There was something in his voice, a quiet sincerity, that made her proud to be the one he turned to. A small, nagging doubt flickered in the back of her mind, but she ignored it. Of course, she agreed. I'll take care of everything. Ethan exhaled silently. He never thought he'd stoop to inventing a niece, but if it was the only way to steal time with her, he was willing to take that risk. For the rest of the week, Natalie threw herself into planning the party. She contacted top-tier caterers, selecting a menu fit for a teenager's palate. She designed a photography-themed decor because Ethan had told her Emily loved photography. She personally vetted every detail, from lighting to music, ensuring it would be a flawless event. And every moment Ethan watched her work so passionately, the guilt twisted deeper inside him. She had no idea that everything she was doing was built on a lie. By Friday, Natalie entered his office, holding a detailed event proposal. I finalized the menu and seating arrangements, she said, setting the documents before him. I also found an amazing cake designer who specializes in custom art pieces. I thought a vintage camera cake would be perfect for Emily. Ethan picked up the cake sketch she had chosen. It was beautiful, thoughtful, and completely unnecessary. Guilt churned inside him like a storm, but it was too late to stop now. You did an excellent job, Natalie, he said, his voice low but sincere. Thank you. She smiled, her eyes warm with satisfaction. Actually, I should be thanking you, she said softly. For the first time, I'm seeing a different side of you, Ethan. A man who isn't just a CEO, but someone who cares about his family. The words cut deeper than he expected. If only she knew the truth. But there was no time to dwell on that, because tomorrow was Saturday, and Natalie was about to find out everything. On Saturday night, Natalie Carter stepped out of her car in front of Ethan Caldwell's penthouse. In her hands was a carefully wrapped gift, a vintage film camera she had spent a week tracking down. A gift for Emily, the niece she had never met but had spent an entire week planning the perfect birthday for. But when the penthouse doors opened, she froze. There was no party, no decorations, no birthday cake, no guests. Only Ethan standing there, a dinner table set for two, candlelight flickering across his face. Natalie, his voice lacked its usual confidence. She set the gift down, eyes scanning the room, searching for an explanation. Where's the party? Her voice was carefully controlled, but suspicion laced every word. Ethan held her gaze for a long moment before answering. There is no party. Her heart plummeted. Then, where's Emily? He swallowed hard. She doesn't exist. The gift slipped from her grasp, hitting the floor with a dull thud. She went still, mind struggling to process his words. What did you just say? Ethan inhaled deeply, steadying himself. I made it up. I wanted a night with you, without work standing between us. Natalie felt like she had been punched in the chest. All week she had poured herself into this. Every detail, every phone call, every decision. And it had all been a lie. You lied to me, she whispered, her voice trembling. Not just with anger, but with something deeper. You made me believe you were different. Ethan took a step forward. Natalie, it's not like that. Then what is it? She cut him off, her eyes shining with betrayal. I spent an entire week thinking about this party, about your so-called niece, about how much this meant to you. I thought I was seeing a side of you no one else had, but it was all just a game to you, wasn't it? Ethan exhaled sharply. I didn't mean to hurt you. Then why does it feel like you did? She shot back, her voice breaking. Ethan clenched his fists, torn between defending himself and admitting he had made a terrible mistake. I just didn't know any other way to get time with you. She laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. You're one of the most powerful men in New York, But you didn't have the courage to simply ask me to dinner like a normal person? The truth hung between them, raw and painful, like shattered glass on the floor. Do you know how much time I spent on this? Her voice wavered with emotion. The calls, the late nights, all for a party that never existed? Ethan stepped forward, regret etched into every feature. Natalie, I'm sorry, but she shook her head. Not because the apology wasn't genuine, but because it came too late. She turned toward the door. We're done, Ethan. And with those words, she walked away. New York had never felt colder. Natalie hurried down the steps of the penthouse building, every step carrying the weight of anger, betrayal, and disappointment. She felt foolish, not just for being lied to, but for believing in Ethan. He had made her believe that beneath his cold exterior was a man with a heart. But in the end, it was all an illusion. The elevator doors opened, but before she could step inside, Ethan caught up to her. Natalie, wait. She turned sharply, her eyes flashing with hurt. I don't want to hear any more lies, he exhaled as if struggling with himself. I never lied about the things that matter. She laughed bitterly. You don't think inventing a niece is something that matters? Ethan clenched his jaw, knowing he had no defense. I know I was wrong, but I didn't do it to manipulate you. Natalie crossed her arms. Then what was it? A power move? A test to see if I'm the kind of woman who's easily controlled? He shook his head firmly, his voice dropping lower, filled with the weight of 3 years of silence. No, I did it because I love you. The confession froze time. Natalie went completely still, the world blurring around her. You think those 3 words change everything? Ethan looked at her, his dark eyes steady, more certain than ever before. No, but they're the truth. And I was too much of a coward to say them the normal way. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. He said he loved her. But did that even matter, now that trust had been broken? She opened her eyes, her voice quiet but sharp. Ethan, did you ever think about me? Did you ever consider what I go through every day working for you? I have spent 3 years proving that I deserve my position, that I am not just the CEO's favorite. And now, you've destroyed that. Ethan didn't look away. I know, and if I could go back, I would do it differently. She shook her head, her voice breaking. But we can't go back. They stood there, in the quiet space between skyscrapers and city lights, the weight of their shattered trust pressing down on them. Ethan watched her for a long moment before speaking. If you can tell me that you have never felt anything for me, that you have never thought about this, I'll let you go. Natalie didn't answer immediately. She could lie. She could deny everything. But it wouldn't change the truth. She looked up, and in her eyes was a storm of conflicting emotions. I can't. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was the truth. And sometimes the truth is the first step toward fixing everything. New York was drowning in darkness, but the space between Ethan Caldwell and Natalie Carter was thick with tension. She had admitted that she couldn't deny her feelings, but that didn't mean she forgave him. Ethan watched Natalie, reading the conflict in her eyes. Part of her wanted to run, yet another part wanted to believe in him. Just one more time. If I could go back, I would do things differently, Ethan said, his voice low and sincere. Natalie laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's the problem, Ethan. You can't go back. She had built her entire career on one rule: never let emotions interfere with business. And now she stood before the hardest decision of her life: to trust a man who had deceived her, or to walk away from something that might be the most important thing in her life. Ethan took a step forward. I'll do whatever it takes to prove that I mean this. Natalie shook her head, her eyes glistening under the streetlights. It's not about whether you love me, Ethan. It's about whether I can love someone like you after everything you've done. The air froze between them. For the first time in his life, Ethan realized he was facing a battle he wasn't sure he could win. He had conquered the toughest competitors in business. But could he win Natalie's heart? Finally, she sighed, stepping back. I need time. And with those words, she walked away, leaving Ethan standing alone in the vast city. But this time, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let her go forever. A week passed. Natalie avoided Ethan. She buried herself in work, keeping their interactions strictly professional. No more coffee exchanges in the morning, no more lingering conversations after hours, and certainly no more stolen glances across the office. But Ethan was never one to give up easily. On Friday night, as Natalie was about to leave the office, she received a message from him. "Come to the rooftop. If you still want to walk away after tonight, I won't stop you." She should have ignored it. She should have kept walking out of the building. But instead, she stepped into the elevator, pressing the button for the top floor. When the doors opened, New York stretched out before her, a sea of shimmering lights, endless and breathtaking. Ethan stood there, a table set for two, but this time, there were no lies. "I don't want you to feel pressured," he said. "I just want a chance to say everything I didn't say before." Natalie crossed her arms, her voice sharp. "Ethan, do you really think a romantic dinner can erase everything?" He shook his head. "No, but this isn't about dinner. It's about us." She hesitated, but then she stepped forward, pulled out a chair and sat down. Ethan looked at her, and in his eyes was everything he had never been brave enough to say. "I've gambled my entire career on high-stakes deal," he began, "but the biggest gamble I ever took was you." Natalie inhaled deeply, her heart skipping a beat. "And if you give me a chance," he continued, "I swear I will never make you doubt me again." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then finally she said, "One dinner. No promises, no commitments. Just one dinner." A slow smile spread across Ethan's lips. "Then I'll start from there." And as New York glittered below them, they found their second chance. No expensive wine, no candlelight, no pretense. The rooftop dinner was not a performance, not a psychological game. For the first time since everything fell apart, Natalie felt like Ethan was being completely honest. They didn't rush through their meal. They didn't try to fill the silence with meaningless conversation. There was just space between them. But for once, it wasn't uncomfortable. Finally, Natalie set down her fork, meeting Ethan's gaze. "What do you want, Ethan?" He took a deep breath, then answered, "I want you to trust me again." She smirked, but there was no humor in it. "You think that's easy?" "No," he admitted, "but I'm willing to wait." Natalie stilled. In 3 years of working with Ethan, she had never known him to be a patient man. He was the kind of person who refused to accept failure, who never waited for anything out of reach. And yet here he was, saying he would wait. "So what do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice less sharp than before. Ethan studied her for a long moment before answering. "I don't want you to do anything. I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Natalie felt something tighten in her chest. She wasn't sure if she was ready to forgive him, but one thing became clear in that moment. Ethan had changed, and maybe only time could answer the biggest question of all. Could love truly conquer everything? 2 weeks passed. Things between Natalie and Ethan were still uncertain. She no longer avoided him, but she didn't seek him out either. There was an invisible line between them. Not an impenetrable wall, but an unfinished bridge. Then on a Friday afternoon, Ethan knocked on Natalie's office door. "I need to talk to you." She studied him for a long moment before nodding. "All right." He stepped inside, but he didn't sit down. Instead, he stood before her desk, his eyes steadier than ever. "I'm flying to London for an important deal," he said. "I'll be gone for 2 weeks." Natalie felt an unexpected wave rise inside her, but she kept her expression neutral. "Good luck." He nodded, but he still didn't leave. "That's not all I wanted to say." Ethan took a deep breath, as if preparing for one final gamble. Then he placed a plane ticket on her desk. "I want you to come with me." Natalie's eyes widened in shock. "What?" He looked at her, his voice low but full of emotion. "I know I broke your trust, but if we have any chance, we need to start somewhere that isn't overshadowed by the past." She felt her heart pounding. She could refuse. She could tell him it was over. But instead, she looked down at the plane ticket, then back up at the man standing in front of her. Was she willing to take this gamble? Natalie stared at the plane ticket lying on her desk, feeling like it was an invitation into the unknown. Ethan didn't push her. He simply stood there, letting her make her own choice. Natalie stared at the plane ticket, torn between reason and the undeniable pull of what they once had. Trust wasn't rebuilt overnight. But was she ready to let go completely? She exhaled sharply. "If I go with you," she said slowly, "it doesn't mean I forgive you." She studied him, searching for any sign of arrogance or expectation, but all she found was sincerity. "Then why?" she asked. "Why do you want me to come with you?" He sighed as if he had been waiting for this question. "Because I don't want to go without you." Her fingers tightened into fists. This wasn't the answer she expected. She thought he would give her some kind of persuasive argument, that this was a great career opportunity, that she would learn something valuable. But instead, he just told the truth. And that made her heart race. She wasn't a risk taker. Her entire life had been carefully planned. But for the first time, she felt that if she didn't take this chance, she would regret it forever. She picked up the ticket, her eyes still wary. "One trip." A flicker of hope crossed Ethan's face, but he didn't push further. "One trip." She nodded. "I'll meet you at the airport." And with those words, she took the biggest gamble of her life. JFK Airport. 6 a.m. Natalie stood among the bustling crowd, her grip tightening around the plane ticket. She still wasn't entirely sure about her decision. She could have refused. She could have let everything fade into the past. But instead, she was here, in the middle of a busy airport, with a small suitcase and a storm raging inside her. Ethan appeared in the distance, dressed in a long gray coat, his posture calm, but his eyes holding a flicker of tension. She studied him for a moment, then walked forward. "You actually came," he said, his voice carrying a hint of relief. She nodded. "One trip, remember?" A small ghost of a smile crossed Ethan's lips, but he said nothing more. They checked in, passed through security, and boarded their flight to London together. As the plane took off, Natalie gazed out the window. The city of New York shrank below them, and she realized she wasn't just leaving a place. She was leaving behind everything familiar. Ethan leaned in, his voice low. "Do you regret it?" She looked at him, then shook her head. "Not yet." And as the plane pierced through the clouds, she knew she had just stepped into the unknown. London, 8 a.m. The plane touched down at Heathrow Airport, the soft morning sunlight of London filtering through the cabin windows. Natalie took a deep breath, feeling both anxious and strangely relieved. Ethan and she stepped off the plane, the rush of people around them, yet between them there was only a strange silence. As they exited the terminal, a car was already waiting. "Welcome to London," Ethan said, his eyes holding something she couldn't quite read. Natalie offered a small smile, but she kept her distance. "This is business, remember?" Ethan nodded. "Of course, strictly business." But as the car rolled through the cobbled streets, as they passed the bridges stretching over the Thames, Natalie felt that this was more than just another business trip. That night at the Langham London, Natalie opened the door to her hotel room, gazing at the city skyline, a mix of historic beauty and modern brilliance. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. When she opened it, Ethan stood there, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "First night in London. Feel like a walk?" Natalie hesitated, then nodded. They wandered through Piccadilly Circus, played arcade games, and laughed when Natalie beat Ethan mercilessly at a racing game. Later, they found themselves standing beneath the London Eye, gazing at the city lights reflected in the Thames. Inside the cabin of the London Eye, the city stretched beneath them like a masterpiece. Natalie leaned lightly against the glass railing, her gaze sweeping over the historic rooftops and glowing streets. She had never felt so free, yet never had she felt so close to Ethan. Ethan sat across from her, absent-mindedly turning a silver ring on his finger. "Natalie," he broke the silence, his voice quiet but firm, "I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you." She didn't turn to face him right away, still gazing at the vast sky. "What do you want to say, Ethan?" He took a deep breath. "I used to think I could control everything. Business, deals, even my own feelings. But I was wrong." He looked at her directly, and this time, his voice wasn't that of a calculated businessman, but of a man laying his heart bare. "I love you, Natalie. I love you in a way that I don't even have the words for. I love the way you never back down, the way you're smarter than anyone I've ever met. The way you can make me feel small with just a look. Natalie shivered slightly, but she let him continue. I love the way you argue with me. The way you always win. I love you even when I tried my hardest not to. Ethan let out a small, breathless laugh, but his eyes held a quiet sadness. I was scared. Scared that if I said it, I'd lose you. But the truth is, keeping my distance from you was the worst mistake I've ever made. Natalie turned then, really looking at him for the first time, and for the first time she saw the vulnerability in Ethan's eyes, a sincerity that held no pretense. She wasn't sure if she was ready to forgive him, but she was sure of one thing. Her heart had never raced this fast. Ethan drew in a shaky breath, then held out his hand. If you have even a little faith left in me, just a little, let me make things right this time. Natalie gripped the railing, her fingers cold against the metal. Every rational part of her screamed to walk away. Memories of that night at his penthouse flooded back. The betrayal, the disappointment. But then, there were also the small moments. The way he had looked at her in the arcade. The way he had waited, never pressuring her. Ethan's voice softened. I don't deserve you, Natalie. But if you give me this chance, I swear I will never let you regret it. The city stretched beneath them, endless and full of possibility. Her heart pounded. She could walk away, return to the life she had built so carefully. Or she could take a risk. Slowly, hesitantly, she placed her hand in his. You were wrong about a lot of things, she whispered. Ethan tilted his head slightly. Like what? She smiled softly for the first time in what felt like forever. You can't live without me. And as the London eye lifted them higher into the starlit sky, Ethan gently leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. Slow, reverent, no rush, no pressure. Natalie closed her eyes, not pulling away. For the first time, she truly believed they might have a new beginning. 3 months later, Natalie stepped into the office, the rhythmic tap of her heels echoing on the polished wooden floor. She could feel the subtle glances cast in her direction, not out of curiosity, but because everyone knew the truth now. She and Ethan were together. 3 months ago, they had returned from London, no longer just boss and assistant, but as two people who had fallen deeply in love. Even so, they remained professional at work, drawing clear boundaries and keeping their personal life separate. But it was obvious to everyone that whenever their eyes met, the rest of the world seemed to disappear for just a moment. That evening, Ethan picked her up after work, instead of letting the company driver take her home. Another surprise? Natalie tilted her head, smiling at the familiar glint in Ethan's eyes. Just taking you somewhere special. The sky was painted in hues of gold and amber as they walked through the field of wildflowers. The soft whisper of the wind carried the scent of earth and blossoms, a quiet reminder of home. Natalie let her fingers trail through the petals, a nostalgic smile on her lips. Does this place mean something to you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket, eyes steady, as he slowly knelt down. The world seemed to still. Natalie's breath caught. The moment felt surreal. The man who had once been untouchable, unreachable, now kneeling before her with the most sincere look in his eyes. He opened the box, revealing a simple but breathtaking ring, the diamonds catching the last rays of the setting sun. I love you, Natalie, he said, his voice raw with emotion. From London to here, from every moment of hesitation to this one certainty, I want to spend forever loving you. She felt something deep within her chest tighten, an overwhelming wave of emotion crashing over her. She had spent years fearing love, fearing that letting someone in meant giving them the power to hurt her. But Ethan had already hurt her. And yet, he was here. A single tear slipped down her cheek. She laughed softly, shaking her head. You know I never make things easy for you, Ethan chuckled, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Slowly, with absolute certainty, she extended her hand. Then don't let me down. As Ethan slid the ring onto her finger, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and violet. No grand spectacle, no extravagant display, just one perfect moment. Natalie watched as Ethan held out the ring, his expression open, vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. For so long, she had been afraid of love, of losing herself in something she couldn't control. But standing here in this moment, she realized something. She wasn't losing herself. She was finding something worth holding on to. She extended her hand, her eyes shining with absolute trust. Then don't let me down. No grand spectacle, no extravagant displays, just one perfect moment between the two of them. And this time, they truly walked forward together, toward forever.